February 1947. Southern seas stripped of mercy, the kind that chew through iron hulls and men alike. 5 days into the final survey leg, the world around us looked infinite and wrong at the same time. A flat white so still it felt like the planet itself had stopped breathing. The ice beneath our boots wasn't fractured by nature, but scored clean, carved as if by some hand that understood geometry better than weather. Instruments twitched without reason, needles stuttering like hearts out of sync. 5 miles off our bow, the seaplane tender floated small against the void, gray and shivering in the wind. The scent of aviation fuel clawed through my gloves, cold, chemical, alive. Engines idled in low growls, and through the headset came a pulse that no frequency chart could name. One soft click every 9 seconds, steady as a metronome measuring silence. The paperwork called our task a training mission, photographic runs, weather samples, survival drills. But everyone knew the truth sat crated in the hold. The box was wrapped tight in maybe tape, stenciled only with serial numbers. And when the wind rose, it tapped faintly from inside, like a hand testing its own coffin. I logged the time just as the next pulse cracked through the static. We'd sailed south from Norfolk the previous summer, the world still smoking from the war we swore had ended. Yet the brass had driven us toward another front, this one against the cold itself. They named it Operation Highjump, which sounded almost playful until you saw the manifest. 13 ships, thousands of men, a carrier stacked with aircraft. Nobody hauls that much ordnance just to study weather. I was a second-class radioman, assigned to a PBM Mariner flying boat under Rear Admiral Byrd's command. The carrier USS Philippine Sea bore most of the planes south. Our tender, the Pine Island, ferried the crews and deer. She was built for rescue and reconnaissance, long range, deep tanks, and a crew hard enough to survive weeks at the edge of creation. We crossed the equator before Christmas, heat thick enough to choke below decks. Then, as if a switch flipped, the air sharpened, turning from wet to surgical. Each day the sea darkened from blue to iron to slush, until the first icebergs rose from the fog like marble towers. Even the veterans went quiet watching them drift past, white monoliths that made men look borrowed. On paper, our objectives read simple: chart the coast, photograph the raw sea, test gear, study radio distortion near the pole. That last part was mine. I handled the longwave transmitter and the new magnetometer we kept aft, supposed to track how weather warped signal paths. Maybe it was research, maybe something else. A few officers wore patches I'd never seen before, their notebooks chained shut when not in use. By late December, we reached the Bay of Whales, where the shelf rose from black water like a wall built before time. Searchlights brushed ridges that glinted faint green, glassy as bottle shards. We anchored against the barrier, cranes creaking as we swung the first seaplane into the gray. The cold there wasn't air, it was metal given breath. Touch steel and it sang through your bones. The opening week passed in monotone routine, short recon flights, supply drops to the ground team building Little America 4, grid photography under perpetual twilight. We lifted off in half-light and returned by dusk, engines crusted with rime, radio chatter dissolving into static, nothing abnormal, until the 5th sortie. Mid-climb, my compass spun 4 full turns. The pilot swore it was magnetic drift, but halfway across the shelf it happened again. The magnetometer's needle slammed against its stop, shivered like a live wire, then froze. In the same breath, the receiver caught a low rhythmic beat, 3 taps every 9 seconds. Too clean for interference, too alive to be coincidence. I logged it, marked bearings, passed the slip to the watch officer. He read it twice, jaw set, and told me to file it under atmospheric distortion. We never spoke of it again. That night, halos ringed the moon like polished metal. Diesel fumes tangled with another smell. Sulfur, faint but definite, blowing in from the ice. Someone joked about hidden volcanoes, yet the science lieutenant stayed on deck long after the laughter faded, binoculars fixed on the horizon, as if waiting for something to answer the pulse. The next day, 4 men from the shore team vanished, sled tracks running straight toward the western ridges and stopping where the storm erased them. Snow grounded every plane for 2 days. By the time the sky cleared, radio contact was gone. Orders came quick: prepare for aerial search. When dawn finally broke, the light cut sharp enough to blind. Ice glittered in metallic blues. We were given new coordinates, west of any mapped line, and a sealed case from that same lieutenant, labeled only by code. He claimed it held environmental sensors, though the thing rattled when you moved it. We launched at first light, frost flaking off the hull like ash. As the tender shrank behind us, I heard a faint double knock under the fuselage, same rhythm as the headset pulse. The pilot blamed shifting ice. I wasn't convinced. 2 hours on dead reckoning, nothing but white until the horizon opened into a perfect circle of black water steaming in the cold. The sulfur stench returned, sharp enough to taste. I marked coordinates and tuned the receiver. The pulse came alive. 3 beats, pause. 3, pause, exact cycle as before. The pilot set us down on the rim to refuel and inspect. The water should have been frozen. Instead, it rolled in slow waves that whispered under the floats. The engineer muttered about geothermal vents. The lieutenant only stared. When the hull kissed the surface, the smell flooded in, ozone and metal, like old coins scorched in brine. The magnetometer snapped hard right and locked. Beneath the water, something moved. Lines, ridges, too deliberate for rock. The hull knocked again, synced perfectly to the signal in my ears. My neck went cold. The lieutenant ordered photographs. The pilot steadied our drift while the cameraman leaned into the hatch, breath fogging the lens as heat shimmered off the lake. No one spoke. Temperature gauges climbed, though the air outside could kill a man bare-faced. I noted times, bearings, pulse count. The pencil broke mid-stroke. Even with the headset off, I still heard it, deep in the fuselage, a heartbeat that wasn't ours. The lieutenant finally said to taxi shoreward. The edge was jagged, black gravel biting through the snow. 2 sleds lay half-buried, no motion. We cut engines, silence slammed shut. The wind itself seemed to hold back. The first body sat upright beside a sled, eyes open, frost rimming the lashes, radio pack crushed flat. 20 yards away lay another, half-covered, skin unmarked, simply stopped. The remaining 2 were gone, their gear scattered like a retreat. Among it, a small gray metal case, warm to the touch despite the cold, a circular scorch of 3 concentric rings branding its lid. We hauled it aboard with the dead. The lieutenant's voice was thin. Secure it. The pilot wanted out. Clouds were closing fast. As we built speed along the ice, the hull knocked thrice in that same rhythm before liftoff. Once airborne, the instruments settled, pulse fading back into static. Command's response to our report was one sentence: return to base. No mention of the missing men, no acknowledgement of the coordinates. Back aboard the Pine Island, medics claimed the bodies, and a team with blank uniforms carried the hot case below decks. When I tried to file my log, the comm officer replaced it with a clean sheet. Rewrite it, he said. Admiral's orders. No anomalies, no pulse, no open water. I didn't argue, but that night the tender smelled of sulfur again, and every groan of her hull came in threes. 2 nights later, the lieutenant summoned me and the pilot to the wardroom. The air inside was dim and stale, a single lamp throwing yellow across the table where the same gray case sat wiped clean. The metal looked newer somehow, as if it had been polished from within. He told us we'd be returning to the same coordinates at dawn. No rescue this time. He called it a calibration flight, meant to test magnetics along the fault line I'd recorded. The word calibration didn't fit what was in his eyes. The pilot protested, voice low but firm. We're not surveyors anymore, he said. We're bait. The lieutenant didn't answer right away, just looked at him like a man trying to read a signal through noise. Orders come from command, he said at last. We follow them. His tone didn't leave room for debate. When we left the wardroom, the hum of the ship's engines had shifted, still rhythmic, but slower, heavier, like the sound from the lake had seeped into the hull itself. I couldn't sleep. Every click of metal cooling outside my cabin came in those same measured threes. I tried tuning the longwave receiver again, but the pulse had changed. It was cleaner now, almost like it was waiting for me to answer. At dawn, the sky was flat gray, the world colorless. The pilot met me on deck, face pale and sleepless. He asked if the signal was still there. I told him yes. He said, then it's expecting us. We launched at first light, the sea around us glass still. Not a word was spoken during takeoff. I strapped in at my station and waited for the needle to twitch. It didn't take long. Within 20 minutes, the magnetometer began to shake, swinging farther each pass. The pulse in the receiver grew louder, closer, as though we were flying toward its throat. I logged the readings with trembling hands. The pilot banked us toward the same stretch of ice where we'd found the open water. From above, the world was endless white, horizon erased. Then the lake appeared, wider now, blacker, steam rising in thin veils. The edges had melted back, and the snow around it shimmered faintly green. Even from altitude, the smell reached us through the vents, sulfur and hot iron. The pulse maxed it beat for beat, steady as breathing. The engineer muttered a prayer under his breath, one hand clamped on the throttle. We circled twice, the compass spinning each time, until the lieutenant ordered descent. His voice was calm, almost detached, like he was reading instructions written by someone else. The pilot hesitated, saying the ice looked unstable, but the lieutenant's tone turned sharp. "Put us down." We landed on the northern edge, floats slicing the water with a hiss. The sound that came back from below wasn't echo, it was reply. We drifted to the same area where the sleds had been, though now nothing remained but dark slush and a faint heat haze curling off the surface. The engineer kept the engines idling, ready for immediate lift. The lieutenant opened the crate and pulled out new instruments, twin black spheres wired to a small control box, along with rods coiled in cable. He called them transmitters, part of a reflection test. We placed them on the deck and fed the lines into the radio panel. The moment the leads connected, the pulse flooded the speakers, louder than any static I'd ever heard. Even with the set powered down, the sound bled through, a deep, slow rhythm that made my teeth ache. The pilot muttered that it wasn't reflection, it was contact. No one answered him. I focused on my log, forcing the pencil to stay steady. Outside, the clouds thinned, and light shifted red, glowing through the fog like dusk had arrived at midday. The ice on the far shore began to shimmer. Then the water riddled, not from wind, but from movement underneath. Perfect concentric rings spread outward. The hull thumped 3 times, deep and deliberate. "Starboard float rising," the engineer shouted. The pilot throttled up, balancing against lift that wasn't coming from air. The whole lake seemed to breathe beneath us, slow and massive. I leaned to the side blister and looked down. Through the green-tinted water, I saw angles, straight lines too precise to be natural, forming a grid the size of a city. One section glowed faintly, then faded like a dying ember. The photographer snapped frame after frame until his camera jammed. The lieutenant watched in silence, his face caught between awe and terror. "Mark that bearing," he said. I read off the numbers. He nodded once, then ordered a burst transmission on that vector. I keyed the signal. The return wasn't static. It was the same 3-beat pattern, faster now, answering. The pilot cursed, hands white on the controls. "We're leaving," he said. The lieutenant's reply was cold. "Hold for 60 seconds. We did. The pulse grew until it rattled the windows, until the air in our lungs vibrated. The magnetometer slammed hard to 0. The temperature gauge climbed though the vents blew Arctic air. My headset filled with the pounding of something alive. Then, all at once, it stopped. The world went mute. The water below smoothed to glass, the hum in the hull vanishing mid-beat. The lieutenant told us to retrieve the transmitters. One rod was Rome enough to blister skin, the other had burned clean through its cable. He stared at the charred coil like he was trying to read a message written in ash, then sealed the crate without a word. The pilot gunned the engines, and we tore across the surface until the floats broke free. Spray hit the windows like shrapnel. As we climbed, the engineer muttered that the lake was boiling, but I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the fuel gauge, ticking gallons like seconds. The pulse was gone, but the silence it left behind was worse, like the world was waiting for the next breath. Back aboard the Pine Island, the deck crew stared at the scorch marks on our hull and the black residue streaking the floats. Name'tains chalked it up to exhaust soot. The lieutenant said nothing, carrying the crate below decks himself. That night the ship shuddered, subtle but constant, like something underneath was pushing upward. Some said it was ice shift. I knew the rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3, pause, 9. When I finally slept, the sound followed me into dreams, that buried grid glowing green beneath the water, pulsing in time with my own heartbeat. 3 days passed in a blur of cold routine and quiet dread. The sea around the tender froze and cracked in restless cycles, as if something deep below kept turning in its sleep. Officially, flights were suspended due to weather, though the sky stayed clear enough to see the horizon cut sharp against the white. Men kept busy to stay sane, scraping frost from cables that would refreeze minutes later, hauling fuel drums that no one seemed to need. The smell of sulfur never left, its see-through paint and clothing, tainting food and coffee alike. The ship's doctor blamed condensation from the water supply, but no one believed him. I spent most of that time in the radio room, half because it was warmer, half because I couldn't stop listening. The pulse returned every night, faint but steady, 3 beats every 9 seconds. When I traced its bearing, it always pointed back toward the lake. Each night it grew clearer, closer. I brought the readings to the communications officer, but he waved me off and marked them as atmospheric. He signed my log himself and told me to rest. That night, I found my signature erased. The pilot, meanwhile, had begun to cough, dry, shallow bursts that left his face pale and his eyes bloodshot. He said it felt like altitude sickness, only heavier, like the air itself was pressing inward. The engineer swore his wristwatch lagged by minutes whenever the pulse came through the hull. We started comparing clocks against the ship's chronometer every hour. It drifted more each time. On the fourth day, a convoy from the Eastern Group appeared on radar. 3 supply ships and 2 destroyers. They docked under low fog and brought replacement parts, but also new faces. A handful of officers wearing unmarked parkas boarded that night, carrying steel crates and cables thicker than my wrist. No insignia, no ranks, just blank eyes and quiet movements. The crew called them the Quiet Men. They spoke to no one and took over one of the forward holds, walking it from the inside. By morning, fresh orders came down. Another flight, this time north of the lake, inland, along a fixed course. The lieutenant was gone. One of the Quiet Men would accompany us instead. He arrived before dawn, carrying a folded map with no markings and a black leather notebook sealed shut with wire. He took the jump seat behind the pilot without a word. We launched into still air, the engines sounding oddly hollow against the empty sky. The ice below spread unbroken for miles, smooth as polished glass. 30 minutes in, the pulse returned, faint but deliberate. I logged its timing, my pencil shaking each time the beat passed through the hull. The man behind us wrote in silence, matching each mark to mine. At 80 miles inland, the compass failed. The needle spun twice, then locked east though we were flying due south. The magnetometer went blank, no signal at all. The new man ordered us to hold position. He opened the gray crate and removed the same black spheres we'd used before, attaching them to fresh cables and setting the control box on his lap. Signal amplifiers, he said flatly, will enhance reception. When he powered them on, the radio filled with noise, not static, but layered sound like whispering through deep water. The pilot tried to speak over the intercom, but his voice vanished in the distortion. I could hear something else instead, low, rhythmic, almost language, reaving through the 3-beat pattern. It wasn't words I could recognize, but cadence, measured, intentional. The engineer shouted that the port engine was fluctuating, but his voice sounded distant, worked like it was traveling from underwater. The new man kept tuning the dial, his hand trembling slightly. The sound built until the windows began to vibrate. The pilot yelled to cut power. The man didn't move. The port engine backfired once, the whole aircraft lurching as if struck from beneath. The noise from the radio shifted pitch, rising into a hum that called through our teeth. Then the sky below us changed. The ice, endless and dead a moment before, began to shimmer with faint lines stretching outward from a single dark point far below. Straight, symmetrical, impossibly geometric. It was as if we were flying over the map of a buried city. The photographer lifted his camera, cursed as the film jammed again, and dropped it. The hum faded as the man behind us flipped a switch. The silence that followed was total, pressing. He closed his notebook, the pages lined with neat numbers, and ordered a return to base. No explanation. As we turned, the pulse resumed, but now it came from behind us, following instead of leading. I could feel it thumping through the seat frame, deep and deliberate. The engineer looked at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "It's tracking us." We landed near dusk. The sea had turned black, waves moving in slow, syrupy rolls. Steam columns rose in the distance where the destroyer sat anchored. The man with the map left without a word, carrying the crate between 2 sailors who didn't wear navy patches. No debrief followed, no mention of anomalies. That night I stayed in the radio room alone, recording the signal on reel tape. The pulse was clearer than ever, each beat crisp, almost percussive. Between the threes I began to hear faint dots and pauses, like broken Morse, but the pattern made no sense. Half letters, fragments, silence. When I played it back, the tape warped where the beats should have been, crinkled as if heat had touched it. I switched the recorder off, but the faint thumping continued, not through the speaker now, but through the bulkhead beside me. The metal seemed to breathe. I leaned close and timed it. 3 beats, pause, 3, pause, 9. Same as always. Before dawn, alarms blared across the deck. A flare had gone up from the ridge outpost. Weather team stranded, engines frozen, requesting retrieval. Ours was the only aircraft prepped and fueled. The pilot's hands shook as he lit his cigarette. "We shouldn't go," he said. The order came anyway. We launched under black sky, the engines sluggish in the cold. The beacon signal from the ridge led us halfway there before fading to nothing. In its place came the pulse, stronger than ever, filling the cabin like another heartbeat. The magnetometer slammed off scale, The engineer pounded it with his wrench, but it stayed pinned. The pilot's voice dropped to a whisper. Same bearing as the lake. I looked through the blister port. The horizon had disappeared. Only a wide plain of black ice stretched beneath us, and at its center glowed a green pulse, slow and alive. The smell hit next. Sulfur and metal, sharper than before, burning the throat. The pilot said we were turning back, but the compass spun uselessly, and the controls grew heavy, like gravity itself had shifted. The engines roared, but we barely climbed. The sound in my headset blurred into a single tone that beat against my chest like my own heart was sinking to it. The engineer shouted numbers I couldn't make out. Then, below the ice, something moved, vast, smooth, and metallic. Its scale beyond imagining. It shifted once, and the entire plane shuddered as though the air had been struck. The pulse cut out. A second later, we broke free, engines howling, air pressure returning in a slam. The compass snapped north. No one spoke for the rest of the flight. When we landed, the deck was silent. Commanders waited at the dock, faces pale under their hoods. They led the pilot away before he even unbuckled. We never saw him again. That night, the quiet men packed their gear and disappeared onto one of the destroyers. The sulfur smell lingered long after their ship vanished into fog. I hid the tape under my bunk, the one that warped from heat. I still don't know why, only that it felt wrong to destroy it. 2 days crawled by after that last flight, and every hour felt stretched thin, the ship holding its breath beneath a weight no one could name. The drills continued, lifeboat checks, engine runs, signal tests, but it all felt like theater, a show for the few officers still pretending command meant control. Word passed quietly that 3 men from the shore base had been evacuated to the carrier, one silent, wrapped in blankets, the other 2 incoherent, muttering about white moving under the ice. None returned. The lieutenant resurfaced that night, thinner, eyes glassed over from sleeplessness. His uniform was immaculate but wrong somehow, the creases too sharp, as if freshly issued. He said the admiral wanted new readings on magnetic scatter, same coordinates, same lake. A replacement pilot waited on deck, a quiet man who didn't ask questions and carried his own leather case. When we launched, 2 sailors loaded the same gray crate aboard. Its paint had been stripped clean this time, no markings. Still, the faint heat coming from it made the air taste of metal and ash. The engines whirred us into a clear dawn, the cold a hard white burn through the windows. The compass held steady for the first hour before drifting again, 2 degrees, then 4. The magnetometer flickered alive, needle twitching like something stirring in its sleep. And then, the pulse returned, soft at first, then strong, perfectly timed, faster than before, as if anticipating us. The new pilot didn't react. The lieutenant leaned close and murmured, "Log this as test signal 7. His tone wasn't instruction, it was exhaustion wearing discipline's mask. The flight path took us straight back to the lake, which had doubled in size since the last mission. The edges were broken now. The ice curled upward like peeled skin, steam spiraling into the wind. As we approached, that smell hit again, sulfur and something like burning wires. The water rippled in its slow, impossible rhythm. 3 waves, pause, 3, pause, 9. The lieutenant handed me a coded message, short and clean. Beacon confirmed, depth unknown. I transmitted it on the assigned frequency. The instant I keyed the last word, the pulse changed. It sped up, doubling tempo until it merged into a continuous tone that made the cabin vibrate. Instruments went haywire, gauges spinning, lights strobing, needles rattling in their glass. The engineer yelled that the port engine was losing power. The pilot pulled to climb, but we dropped 100 feet before it caught again. The light outside dimmed, though the sky was clear as glass. I glanced through the blister. What had been black water was now turning darker, like ink swallowing itself. Then, from beneath, a glow surged upward, green-white veins spreading across the surface in sharp lines, like a living circuit. The lieutenant barked to cut transmission. I slammed the switch, but the sound didn't stop. It wasn't in the radio anymore. It was coming through the metal of the plane itself, vibrating through the floorboards, through our bones. The pilot didn't flinch, hands steady, eyes locked ahead. I watched frost melt off the window frames even as the thermometer showed -20. The engineer shouted we were overheating, the smell of hot oil flooding the cabin, thick with that same electric tang. Then, as abruptly as it began, everything went still. Engines hummed at idle, instruments frozen mid-swing. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The lieutenant's voice came soft, detached. "Return to base." I acknowledged, switched channels, and tried to call the Pine Island. Static answered. We flew blind for nearly an hour, tracking only the faint shadow of the sun through haze. The pulse didn't return, but every few minutes, the hull gave one slow, singular knock. Always one, never more. When the tender finally appeared out of the fog, she was listing slightly to port, the surrounding ice groaning under her weight. Cranes were already working, lowering something massive and shrouded in tarp into the cargo bay. Whatever it was, steam rose off it despite the freezing air. The lieutenant disembarked immediately with the pilot, both carrying the crate. The rest of us were ordered below decks. No debrief, no explanations, just rest orders that felt more like containment. I sat alone in my quarters until I found a folded slip of paper tucked into my jacket pocket. 3 lines of numbers, a frequency, a bearing, a depth in feet, not meters, far deeper than the shelf should allow. No name, no signature. When I showed it to the communications officer, he barely glanced before tearing it in half. "Forget it," he said. "You don't want to keep that, son." But I had already copied the numbers in my log. That night, I dreamt of the lake again. The sound wasn't heard, it was felt, pressing against my chest, sinking with breath and blood. When I woke, the pulse was still there, faint through the wall, even with the radio unplugged. Morning came gray and soundless, a kind of silence that swallowed footsteps. The ship's hum was gone. Even the wind seemed to hold its voice. The few men moving on deck whispered like churchgoers. The portside cargo hatch was sealed under heavy chain. Tarps covered it, but thin wisps of vapor leaked from underneath, glowing faintly in the dark. The lieutenant was gone again, and the new pilot had locked himself in a private cabin, his boots neatly lined outside the door as if waiting for orders he already knew would come. I spent the morning rewriting my logs, bearings, pulse intervals, fuel counts, trying to impose sense on what no longer obeyed physics. Every coordinate traced back to nothing but white emptiness on the charts. By noon, the ship's bell rang twice. Officers muster. We weren't invited, but word moved fast. One of the destroyers had picked up something on sonar, an object moving beneath the ice, running parallel to our position, about 100 feet down. The signal came and went, always returning from the same vector, the lake's direction. Officially, it was a false echo, interference from thermal layers, but I saw the faces of the sonar men. They knew better. That night, command ordered continuous radio watch. I sat alone in the red glow of the console lights, static whispering through the bands. Between bursts, the pulse returned, distant now, slower, fading as if retreating into depth. Yet, every time it struck, the hull trembled just slightly, the timbre of the ship itself changing, as if resonating in sympathy. At 0200, the intercom clicked open on its own. A flat voice, no tone, no call sign, said, "Report to flight deck, nothing else." I went. The deck was empty except for the lieutenant standing by the rail, coat unbuttoned though the cold cut like knives. The sea ice around the ship glowed faint green, faint veins of light calling through cracks like something alive beneath. He told me we're leaving in an hour. Not a flight, he said, a recovery. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name typed clean across it. Open only if the plane doesn't return. Then he walked toward the stern, vanishing into fog. I waited, but he didn't come back. We took off just before sunrise. The world below smothered in fog that glowed faintly green through the thin light. The engines thrummed in perfect rhythm with the pulse that had lived in my chest for days. No one spoke, just the sound of the hull flexing, the steady vibration underfoot that felt more like breathing than motion. Only 3 of us aboard this time, the new pilot, the engineer, and me. The lieutenant was gone, his cabin empty, his name scratched from the duty roster. The air inside the plane felt heavier than usual, like it carried static. We followed the same bearing I'd seen on the torn scrap of paper, those impossible coordinates that claimed the lake went miles deeper than bedrock should allow. For an hour, the world stayed white and endless. The sud of dull coin pressed into haze. Then the pulse began again, steady, deliberate, 3 beats every 9 seconds, echoing through the fuselage instead of the headset. I felt it in my bones before I heard it. The engineer whispered that it sounded like depth charges far below us, moving in sync with the engines. The pilot didn't reply, his face locked forward, jaw tight. When the fog parted, the sea below opened into that same black circle, only larger now, its edges steaming like breath on glass. The pilot said we'd make a low pass for visual confirmation, then circle back. His voice was calm, but his hands betrayed a tremor when they touched the throttle. We dropped altitude until we skimmed barely 50 feet above the surface. The water rolled in slow concentric waves, no wind, No visible cause. The compass turned once, then froze due north. Beneath the ice and vapor, something caught the light. A curve of smooth metal or stone. Massive, too perfect to be natural. It shifted as the water moved, not breaking surface, just flexing like muscle under skin. I shouted for altitude, but the pilot was already pulling up, engines screaming as we climbed through the haze. The lake groaned below, the sound deep and metallic, the kind that you feel in your ribs before it reaches your ears. We circled twice. On the second pass, the globe pulsed 3 times, then vanished. The pulse inside the plane stopped with it. The pilot said quietly, "That's enough," and turned the news homeward. None of us looked back. By the time we reached the tender, the horizon had turned the color of old iron. No one met us on deck. The ship looked deserted, lights dimmed, cranes frozen midair, no voices. The air smelled burnt, like overheated wiring. The pilot left without a word, walking toward the lower decks where the quiet men had worked. I went straight to the radio room, logged every second of flight, altitude, bearings, the pulse pattern. Then I opened the envelope the lieutenant had given me. Inside was a single slip of paper with 5 words typed in black ink. "Do not listen at night." I read it twice, then heard it, the faint tapping on the bulkhead beside me. 3 knocks, pause. 3, pause. 9. I shut off the radio, unplugged every lead. The sound stayed. Sleep was useless that night. The pulse had changed. It wasn't a rhythm anymore, but a language I couldn't translate, a slow murmur at the edge of hearing. I sat awake until dawn, listening to the hull breathe. When I finally climbed to deck, the world had gone wrong again. Fog pressed low, muffling every sound except the creak of ice shifting under our weight. The temperature dropped fast, frost crawling across the rails. Men were sealing hatches, moving supplies topside. No questions, no chatter. Rumor said the Admiral had ordered the fleet north, emergency withdrawal. No one knew why, but urgency hung in every motion. I passed the storage bay where the crate had been kept. The door was chained shut, metal frost creeping from its seams. A single yellow lamp burned above it, flickering as if struggling to hold power. I didn't linger. Whatever was inside still breathed warmth into the air. Around noon, the fog lifted just enough to show the horizon, and that was when we saw it. A line of shadow crossing the ice field, long and smooth, gliding against the wind. The deck crew froze where they stood. Someone whispered that it was a fissure, but it moved too evenly. It was alive, or something close to it. The siren wailed seconds later, the intercom ordering all crew below deck. I ran to the radio room. Static filled every band, but under it the pulse had returned, louder than I'd ever heard it. Not from the airwaves this time, but from the ship itself. It came through the deck, the walls, through me. The engineer burst in, face gray. "Engines won't hold speed," he said. "They're choking like the air's gone thick." He tried the bridge line, but it was dead. The Admiral's voice came faint through the static, a single phrase repeating over and over. "All ships retreat to formation." Then silence. The deck pitched under us, a deep grinding push from below. Tools clattered off the workbench. The hull groaned, bending like something was pulling it down from beneath. I grabbed the emergency headset, tuned to the distress band. A whisper came through, 3 words, repeating in rhythm with the pulse. I could only make out one, the low. The lights flickered, dimmed, then died. In the dark, the floor vibrated again, slow and heavy, too deliberate for ice. The engineer whispered, "It's turning." The sound built until my teeth ached, until the air itself felt solid. Then came the first explosion, not from us, but from portside. One of the destroyers had fired a depth charge. The shockwave rolled through the fog like thunder. For a heartbeat, the pulse stopped. Then it came back, faster, furious. Out the porthole, I saw the destroyer's bow lift straight into the air before crashing down. A column of steam rose where it vanished. The fleet opened fire, shells slamming into ice, echoing like distant drums. On the loudspeaker, the Admiral's final order cut through the chaos. "Detonate the test charges. Fall back to open sea." We had strung experimental explosives across the southern shelf for seismic study. No one had expected to use them for survival. The deck shook as each charge went off. Light flared through the fog, blinding white that turned shadows into silhouettes. The pulse fractured into short bursts, fading like dying signals. For a moment, there was silence. Then the ice heaved upward. A wave of black water rose higher than the masts, rolling without sound. The ship lifted, groaned, and slammed back down. The radio came alive for one last instant, every voice shouting over one another. I caught only fragments, coordinates, bearings, the same word again and again. It's opening. I don't remember the impact, only the silence that came after, the kind that feels thick, like the world itself had lost its sound. When I opened my eyes, everything was dim blue, as if the light came from inside the ice instead of the sky. The ship tilted slightly to starboard, motionless. The engines were dead. Only the soft groan of cooling metal moved through the hull. My head rang with a dull ache, my mouth filled with the taste of iron. I stumbled to my feet and climbed toward the main deck, boots sliding through water pooling in the corridors. The emergency lights flickered weakly, painting the walls red. A past crewman slumped along the passageway, some sitting in shock, others weeping without tears. No one spoke. When I reached the hatch, it was already open. The air that met me was warm, wrongly warm, and smelled of sulfur and wet stone. Outside, the world had changed. The fog was gone, replaced by a pale glow that came from everywhere and nowhere. Above us stretched a dome of faint blue light curving across the sky. No sun, no horizon, just a hollow sphere closing in on all sides. The sea was black as oil and still as glass. No wind, no sound, only reflection. The Admiral stood at the bow, coat buttoned, eyes locked forward. He didn't turn when I joined him. Beneath the ship, shapes moved slowly, massive shadows gliding beneath the surface like whales carved from metal. The ice cliffs that had boxed us in before were gone, replaced by smooth walls of blue crystal, arching outward, seamless, almost polished. The engineer appeared beside me, whispering that our gauges showed pressure far below sea level, but the air was thin and warm, impossible readings. His voice broke when he said it. The Admiral finally spoke, his tone calm, distant, as though he were reciting from memory. "We're inside it," he said. I asked what he meant, but he didn't answer. He raised a hand instead, pointing to the water ahead. The surface rippled once, twice, and then a green light rose from beneath, a familiar hue, cold and soft, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat that had haunted us for weeks. The crew gathered silently along the rails. The water bulged outward, lifting in slow motion. Then it broke. What came up wasn't a creature, not a machine, something between both. A curved mass of smooth metal or stone rose from the depths, black at first, then luminous under its own glow. The ship trembled as it surfaced, an immense silence settling over everything. Steam hissed where the cold air touched it. A single seam appeared across the surface, clean and geometric, followed by another perpendicular line forming across. The metal shifted, the lines spreading outward, until a square section lifted free. Inside was nothing. No chamber, no machinery, just light, soft and white, swirling like fog caught in a beam. The Admiral stepped forward before anyone could move. I tried to stop him, but he was already at the edge, face lit from below. He whispered something I couldn't hear and stepped into the light. There was no sound, no cry, no flesh. He was simply gone. The light pulsed 3 times, then dimmed. The panel closed, and the structure sank slowly back beneath the black water, without a ripple. No one moved for a long time. The pulse faded to memory, leaving only the faint crackle of cooling ice. Slowly the dome above us began to dim, and the world shifted again. The blue glow dissolved into gray daylight, the horizon flattening back into the familiar expanse of white cliffs. The air turned cold enough to bite. The ship groaned, sulling as if released from a grip. By nightfall, the engines came sputtering back to life. A faint voice on the longwave band ordered us to regroup and prepare for departure. The speaker didn't sound like any officer I'd known, and the words repeated in perfect rhythm, too steady to be human. We raised anchor at dawn, turning north toward open water. The ice behind us sealed as we moved, smooth and final. No one spoke about what had happened. The destroyers that remained formed a tight ring around us, guns manned but silent. I went back to the radio room out of habit. The equipment had been stripped clean. No tapes, no logs, nothing but static. I leaned close to the hull. The sound was still there, faint and slow. 3 beats, pause, 3, pause, 9. The Admiral was gone. His name never appeared again in any orders or rosters. The official message said the mission had been terminated early due to weather interference and technical malfunctions. We were instructed to repeat that answer to anyone who asked. The files were sealed before we reached warmer waters. On our last night before leaving the ice behind, I stood on deck watching the horizon glow faint green beneath the clouds. It faded before sunrise, but I could still feel it below, steady as a pulse, deep as thought. I remembered the line from the envelope, "Do not listen at night." Only then did I understand. It wasn't a warning, it was a command. Because once you hear it, it never really stops. We reached the tip of South America by late March, but the air still carried that cold, thin, chemical, unshakable. The sea was calm, almost too calm, and the men moved like ghosts through their final routines. No cheers, no homecoming songs, only the quiet scrape of boots against steel and the endless hum of engines pushing north. Before we docked, men in plain coats boarded us from a small transport. They carried briefcases, spoke in low tones, and moved with the authority of people who didn't need permission. They collected every chart, every log, every scrap of film and magnetic tape. Archival review, they called it. None of it was ever returned. We were ordered to sign papers, non-disclosure agreements, loyalty oaths, statements that reduced the last 4 months to survey operations suspended due to inclement conditions. Those who hesitated were reassigned before sunrise. The pilot's bunk was cleared before dawn. His name vanished from the manifest like it had never been printed there. The lieutenant's too. The admiral's family received a folded flag and a sealed letter. No body, no ceremony, just absence. I went home soon after, discharged with commendation and silence. My record listed extended polar service, nothing more. Yet sleep never came easy again. Every quiet room felt wrong, too hollow, too pressurized, like sound itself bent around some invisible core. Some nights I'd wake to the rhythm of it, the same 3 beats, pause, 3, pause, 9, whispering under the hum of the radiator or the wind through the walls. Doctors called it tinnitus. I let them. You don't explain to anyone that the noise has direction, that it moves when you breathe. Years passed. The world turned its attention elsewhere. Wars, politics, rockets. Antarctica remained sealed, protected for science. But I saw the maps. The same blank stretch south of the pole stayed off limits. Flight paths diverted. Satellites shuttered. They said it was to preserve the ecosystem. They always say that when the truth sinks deeper than the sea can reach. In 1958, a small article buried in the back pages caught my eye. The US was preparing a new series of high-altitude detonations far south of the Atlantic. Operation Argus, they called it. They claimed it was to test radiation belts and atmospheric scatter. I knew those coordinates. Too close, too familiar. They weren't studying anything. They were burying something. I remember sitting in the dark that night, the newspaper trembling in my hands, counting the spaces between the words the same way I used to count the pulse. When the first test went off, the news said it produced strange electromagnetic disturbances across half the world. They blamed solar storms. Maybe they even believed it. But the tone, that slow rhythm that had haunted me for years, it stopped for 3 days, then returned weaker, farther, as if something had been forced deeper beneath the ice. I kept one thing from those days, a small curved strip of metal I'd found wedged under the deck plates of the Mariner after our last landing. Smooth as bone, faintly warm even in freezing air. When held to the ear, it hummed, barely perceptible, but real. I never showed it to anyone. Over time, the hum changed, slower, lower, like distance stretching between breaths. I began to think maybe it was alive, or maybe it was remembering. That's the part that frightens me most. Not that we found something down there, but that it might have found us first. It listens, it learns, it waits. Most of the men from the operation are gone now. Some took to drink, some disappeared in the quiet towns far from the sea. The few still breathing don't talk about it. If you ask, they'll tell you they don't remember, but their eyes always drift south. I've stopped trying to forget. You can't forget a sound that matches your pulse. You can only hope it fades before the last beat. Sometimes in winter, when the wind slides through the vents and the house creaks, I catch that scent again. Burnt metal, ozone, the faint trace of sulfur that no one else notices. When it comes, I switch off the radio, unplug every wire, and sit in the dark, listening for silence that never truly arrives. Because once you've heard it, you understand, the ice isn't empty, it's alive, and it's listening. And when it starts to hum, it's already too late. If you've made it this far, you've heard the echoes of Operation Highjump, the mission that was never meant to be spoken of. They said it was a weather survey. They said it was logistics. But men don't vanish into ice and silence for a weather report. Somewhere beneath that frozen world, something still moves, patient, listening, remembering the sound of our engines and the pulse of our blood. Maybe we buried it. Maybe it's waiting. So the next time you see those headlines about scientific expeditions near the pole, or the aurora lights burn green a little too steady, remember what you've heard tonight. The hum isn't in the air, it's under the ice. This is Captain Rebel, signing off from the shadows between classified lines and forgotten coordinates. If you want the truth, you know where to find me. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and stay ready for the next declassified transmission. Until then, keep your radios cold and never, ever listen at night.